Jessie Purcell joining us today. My name is Rebecca Travis. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the curator and collections manager at Open Studio. And just before we begin, I'd like to do a land acknowledgement. Open Studio acknowledges that it is situated on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee, who are the original owners and custodians of the land on which we continue to create and exist. So just a bit about Open Studio and PrintSpeak. Open Studio is an artist-run center dedicated to contemporary print. We offer accessible, inclusive, and affordable printmaking facilities, programs, and services for artists and the public from across Canada and abroad. We support artists in the creation and the exhibition of contemporary print in an open-minded, safe, and collaborative environment. Our vision is to shape the exploration of print as essential, dynamic, and relevant to contemporary culture and creative thought. PrintSpeak is a brand new virtual education series that focuses on the incredible artists whose work pushes the boundaries of print media. These talks will take you on a journey with each artist to learn about their passion for creating. Before we begin, just a couple of Zoom protocols. Please keep yourself on mute for the talk. This is going to be an approximately 30-minute talk with 15 minutes for a Q&A afterwards. For the Q&A, you can put your questions in the chat or just use the raised hand emoji and we'll get to you at the end of the talk. We're really excited to have Jessie Purcell joining us. Jessie, thank you so much for being a part of this new virtual education series. And we're excited to have you wrap up our kind of summer into fall session. A bit about Jessie. Jessie Purcell is a socially engaged artist and printmaker based in Toronto. He is a member of the continent-spanning Justseeds Artists Cooperative and a founder of Repetitive Press Screenprinting and Design Studio, which focuses on providing handmade graphic materials for cultural producers while working to support social movements. Over to you, Jessie.
Hello, everyone. Zoom is not my natural environment, but I'm happy to be here. And yeah, I'm just going to figure out how to share my screen and get started. There we go. Let me know if this isn't working. Hi, and thank you to Open Studio for this opportunity to share the work that I do, both personally and collectively with others. Yeah, it's nice after such a weird pandemic time to have a chance to connect with people, at least virtually. Yeah. What can I say about myself? Well, first of all, I want to take a second to, oops, this is not working. There we go. Oop. Follow up our land acknowledgement with maybe just like a stab at a responsibilities acknowledgement to maybe think about how to myself and the other non-Indigenous participants can think about how we can not only think about the land that we're on, but our responsibilities to the people that live there. And as printmakers, I feel like at least we have this opportunity to open up our spaces and share our skills to help promote the voices of those Indigenous folks who are trying to re-establish hopefully a new and more positive relationship forward. There's some work that I did at the beginning of Idle No More, and a piece, Bring Our Children Home by Isaac Murdoch, and another piece, Water's Life by Christy Belcourt, who are the members of the Ottoman Collective. We'll see a bit more of their work later. This is not moving. There we go. Yeah, a bit about myself. I grew up in the Eastern Ontario, in Algonquin land, the Ottawa Valley, on a little dairy farm, goat dairy farm, and lived in Ottawa as a teenager, in Montreal for many years. I first started printing, and I've been here in Toronto since 2013. Here's some early work I did in university. I kind of came up in the sort of DIY punk scene that was highly politicized at that time, kind of helping organize with groups like Anti-Racist Action and various social movement organizations. I started doing photocopy graphics, sneak into the back of my dad's bookstore at high school and make photocopy flyers, usually repurposing other people's work and adding a bit, or making photocopy stickers. And then I went to Concordia in 2000. I went to Switzerland, actually, in Lausanne. I was staying on a artist colony squat where they had a functioning screen printing studio, and I really became in love with the medium and came back that fall. It was at Concordia and started printing. Here's some work that I did 20 years ago, at the beginning of just after 9/11, and this one here is called A Gift from the People of the United States, which was commenting on the American invasion of Afghanistan. I was really attracted to the screen printing medium as a way of disseminating work cheaply and accessibly, and also kind of rapidly responding to issues that were happening. And other things that was sort of involved at that time in my early 20s, from 2001, 2006, there was a project that was started for some old friends and new friends called the Mobile Livre Bookmobile Project, which was a touring gallery of curated artist books, zines, and handmade books. And that toured Canada and the United States. It was kind of an American-Canadian coalition of folks that were making this collective happen. So with that, I got to meet other printmakers and people who are into print and micro-publishing. And it was a really fun time, but also strange time because it was just after 9/11. So it was a real shift in the kind of the political landscape. In 2004, I went to this conference in Berkeley, California called Designs on Democracy, and it really kind of fortified my passion for printmaking and for political print. And when I got back, I happened to find, a flyer in a bathroom of a little restaurant in Montreal where I was living, and looking for a screen printing studio mates. So I called up this woman, Leila Majiri, who's an amazing and incredible printmaker, and I had the real privilege of being able to come into her studio and be a studio mate with her and really learn and expand my knowledge of printmaking. Yeah, that was in 2004. And at that point, I had decided to start doing it as a job. So I just kind of maxed out my credit card, bought screens, and was really looking for a way to be self-employed and continue to expand my understanding of printmaking and work on my skills. So I started taking contracts with musicians and for concerts. At that point in time, there was a really thriving and vibrant screen printing and street postering scene in Montreal, rather. Rents were extremely low. There was a big artist studio culture, so it was really affordable if you're paying $200 in rent and your studio is $150 to focus on your art making, and you can work in a way that you wouldn't be able to do in kind of bigger, more expensive cities. Yeah, and here's a shot of ink that I just love ink. So I always find the ink pot's pretty. On a side note, why is this not working? Here's a couple shots of my present studio here in Toronto. For years, I worked on just a tabletop with a piano hinge and some C-clamps holding on the screen. And there's a spray booth that I built using an old bathtub on stilts. Here's mango peeler, another Toronto printmaker, opening up some screens. Other printmakers come and use the space to burn screens, etc. Yeah, and around 2010, I really had, after 6 years of printing sort of 2 by 3 foot big screens. I'd really done a number on my arms. So, and my studio mates at the time, Sari Pop, who were really prolific screen printers, had an auto press. So they inspired me to also get an auto press, which allowed me to kind of level up. Here's a little demo. It allowed me to level up the amount of work I could do on a timeline, also the scale. Getting this machine was a real like transformational moment for me in terms of what I could do and how much I could produce. Here's some examples of the kind of bread and butter work I did pre-pandemic. So I worked with a lot of touring bands and musicians. Here's a wall of like mostly Canadian content that I put up for the city of Toronto during our building because it's scheduled to possibly demolished. So showing off some of the art that's happening in this neighborhood and in this particular space. Yeah, and this kind of was the bread and butter of my shop that allowed me to have the flexibility and the space to continue to print in a pretty steady way. And sorry. Yeah. If anyone wants to see or talk about it later in the question period, just let me know. There's lots of work up. Another thing that was happening around in 2005, maybe, I was participated in a show called Paper Politics. You can see that, which was a collection of political graphic work responding to the that current political situation in the States, that was curated by Josh McPhee, who had also started a graphics distribution kind of business called Justseeds, that he was distributing his work as well as other people's work. And eventually the distribution had been outsourced, and that kind of fell apart, and they're out of some of the participants of that Paper Politics tour. People got together after we put out a call to either stop doing Justseeds or collectivize it. So in 2008, I joined this collective of printmakers that do work that focus on social justice movements. So it's kind of like a niche within a niche of print nerds who are also making work that's contemporarily socially engaged. We have 41 members that's based across the continent, Canada, Mexico, and primarily the United States. We kind of work together collectively and then also individually. And then we have an, I'll show you, here's like the splash page of our, oops, how do I get rid of that thing? Yeah, I don't know how to get rid of this thing, my apologies. Oh, there. Oop. Anyway, yeah, we have a web store and a distribution network that's based out of Pittsburgh, and that's where our warehouse and our prints are based. We have a shop that allows us, here's an example of some of the artists in the shop, and then we sell work, and like a gallery, the collective keeps half the money, but then we are able to decide how we spend the money and which projects we want to fund for every year. So it's a way to like not only just create a distribution network and be able to promote the work of others while they promote your work, but it's also a way of like helping make our art practice more financially stable while doing work to support social movements and create a kind of a pool of money to put into projects to that end. Here's my page. It's got work for sale, and then yeah. Another thing we do within the collective to kind of bring in a consistent revenue stream to fund our projects is called community supported art, where 3 times a year or 4 times a year, we send out packages of prints that people kind of buy on a subscription sort of basis. So you buy for the year and you get 12 prints. And then this last year, they were collaboratively, this year present, we were collaboratively designed and doing it for the last 5 or 6 years. And it's a way for us to kind of bring in a revenue stream at the beginning of the year, and then we can fund our projects. Another way is folks sell. This is in Montreal at a Radical Book Fair. People sell the work of the collective members. So it's amazing to have this network where you're producing work within your own town or studio, and then be able to get it sent out and then have other folks see it kind of across the continent in a way that just you'd never be able to do on your own. And kind of one of the primary things that we do is create a portfolio pretty much every year around a specific issue as a way to like build up a bulk of graphics to support either a particular organization or like a variety of organizations that are working towards that issue. This is Places from the Outside, Artists Against the Prison Industrial Complex that we did in 2008. It was the first portfolio and kind of my gateway into the organization. Each artist did their own print and sent it in, and it was collated in one location, and each artist got a copy of the portfolio to kind of display within their own town, and various organizations that were doing work addressing the prison industrial complex also got them as a way to use as a kind of promotional or educational tool or a fundraiser. Yeah, this is my piece here. And this second one, I'm just gonna maybe check the time. Okay. Yeah, this is resourced. This is another approach where each artist worked with a different organization to kind of figure out how they wanted to be represented graphically. And then here is Forest Trauma, which is see the organizers, there's an addition of 130, and it came out of a street art project that I can show you in a minute. Yeah, this is working with Iraq Veterans Against the War, and which is an issue that resonates with me as my one of my grandfathers had a really bad shell shock, or what would now be called PTSD, from the Second World War. So I grew up as a kid exposed to the effects of war, at least from 2 generations removed. Yeah, and this is the piece that I did, and it was kind of an interesting thing early on to see how you'd make the graphics, and they would go into the portfolio, and the portfolios would be distributed like within a bunch of different levels. We started having them sold through Brooklyn Artists Alliance to various institutional collectors, which was bringing in revenue to allow us to kind of take on more ambitious projects. So they were going into institutional collectives, like institutional collections, working as an archive of social movement graphic work and social movement history. And then also it allowed us to, for instance, IVAW picked 5 graphics, and then I ran with the press an edition of 5,000 or 1,000 each, but a stack of 5,000 of these large 2 by 3 foot prints that were then distributed across the United States, and some of them were sent around the world. And those were put up in the streets and used with kind of anti-war veterans organizing. And it was interesting to see how you could take a medium and have it function in kind of more high art context, but then this fantastic note printing is that you can also at the same time make massive numbers of them and distribute them for free. So this is an emergency looking at women's reproductive justice, organized by Meredith Stern. That's 2012. I'm gonna just kind of quickly go through these, but Migration Now, looking at issues of migration and border detention. This is another portfolio that was organized with IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War. It was printed here in the studio here in Toronto. It's an edition 116. A lot of prints, 67 prints. Most of the work was printed here. Some of it was printed by the artists themselves. And this acted as a real kind of document looking at 10 years of organizing the IVAW, and we were able to fund it by pre-selling some of them with a second package that was like a real complete collection of all the organizing materials that the organization had. So we would pre-sell those to mostly university collections in the States. That kind of endowment economy doesn't really exist in the same way up here, I don't think. If it does, please let me know. Liberating learning, looking at aspects of learning, printed by Mary Tremonte, who was up here for a number of years at OCAD doing her master's. Here, the Storm, that was also half printed here and half in California. And this, each artist worked with a different organization or group that was confronting climate change on the front lines. I worked with the Unistoten camp in Wet'suwet'en territory. And here's Autonomy is Life, Submission is Death, which was produced down in Mexico City by some of our Mexican members. And then Wellspring, a portfolio celebrating water, 2016. Anyway, any of these, if you want to look at further, we can talk in the Q&A. And then this is just to give an idea, like every year we're producing these works. Here's some more recent one, 2018, with a revamp of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign that's been relaunched contemporarily. Yeah, I came up with the slogan, Fight Poverty, Not the Poor, introduced this work. And yeah, here's a quick look at Bookman's front page if you're interested in artist books, and it's an amazing resource if we ever get to free travel again and you're in Brooklyn, definitely check them out. They are a great organization. They have a real mission and drive to like get this kind of work, artist book work, and portfolios archived in institutional collections. And another thing that we do also is we take the graphics from all those portfolios and then other works produced by members, and it's open to the public submission. We have like a large database of downloadable high resolution graphics that people can reproduce either through digital printing, photocopy, or some people like something that gets screen printed. Yeah, and then this is the kind of, it was a street art project that was in 2010 that later became that first IVAW, Iraq Veterans Against the War portfolio. And yeah, this is just interesting for me to, and exciting as a printmaker, to be able to make work, put it out in the street, and then recontextualize it into a more kind of archival project, and then take the money from the archival project and then produce another 5,000 of them and then distribute those. And it's the kind of collective network building that just allows for a lot of like possibilities within print that is, you know, a challenge. Certainly for someone like myself who's more of a like process person, spends a lot of time in the studio. We've done a number of installations and shows. There's just a couple examples. We won the Slovenian Graphic Arts Biennial in 2009, and were invited back in 2011 to do an installation. It's a mix of painting and print with a whole smattering of members that were there on site to put it up. Here, this is Uprisings, Images of Labor, not Laser, at the University of Wisconsin. It's part of the Southern Graphics conference that happened to be held that year in Milwaukee, where a number of members of Justseeds live. And we kind of set up the studio or the gallery as like a functioning print studio, so we could talk about printmaking with folks, and then also use this massively high ceiling to hang the work as we made it. All the prints are on sheets of paper that are 26 by 40, so they're like quite large, 2 by 3 foot size. Printing, really trying to take up that upper space in the gallery. We also had a parallel conference that was free, talking about political graphics and printmaking. Here's a show that I organized down at in Hamilton at Center 3. That was in 2019, just before this pandemic era. That was kind of an overview of Justseeds portfolios, along with some installation work that I'd done a collaboration with Mary Tremonte and then Josh McPhee for previous projects. So that work kind of got repurposed into this exhibit. Yeah, that was organized with Sonali Menez. And yeah, check the time. All right. Here's just a quick shot of me and Paul Cleland from Milwaukee in the studio here in Toronto, working on the autopress for the Poor People's Campaign portfolio. They had put out a call for graphics, and one of our members, Aaron Hughes, had responded saying, okay, well, why don't we, could Justseeds do a portfolio to support the work, and reached out to other designers to come in on the project. So yeah, this press was really like a life-changing occurrence in terms of like being able to produce volume without destroying my body. Here we are, some print shots in the shop. And here's Aaron Hughes from Chicago, just getting ready to collate it. And there we go. And then here is some examples of the work in use that has been printed again on fabric banners in New Jersey and California, and I think there's one in Arizona, Virginia. So the work really, it's amazing to have this kind of collective channel open so that your work can really travel places and you can respond to you know, calls for graphics for folks that are busy organizing. Here it is reprinted digitally massively at the mall in Washington, DC. And then this is a pop-up kind of exhibit. There was like a permanent or like a temporary one during Mayworks later that year. And we did a pop-up exhibit and a print, sort of a live printing demo where people could come and learn to print and make work in support of the Ontario Coalition Against Poverty. So it was like tying in with local organizations and using the opportunity to exhibit the work to also produce work for folks locally who are doing similar anti-poverty work. Here we are, making flags. Paul Cleland again came up for that. A little printing, two-color flag piece with a graphic by Pete Rayland from Justseeds. And then those graphics of the fight poverty not the poor, I then translated into this mural piece that was up at the Hamilton Public Library later that fall. So it's just like showing how the work kind of undulates between living in print art spaces, but then also trying to always like make it useful and bring it back out onto the streets. I do a fair bit of like printmaking and then bring them to demonstrations as a way of just like supporting all of the amazing organizing that's being done. There's some posters I made for Black Lives Matter demo and the shutting down Allen Road after Andrew Roku was killed by police here in Toronto. This is probably the most photographed print I've ever designed or made. Really, really got a lot of coverage. And then interestingly, a couple of years later, this local photographer, Jelani Morgan, who I don't actually know, but his work was up downtown, and it had photographs of that action. He's a Black Lives Matter organizer, I believe. So there's photographs of the action, and just sort of interesting to see how the work kind of lives in all these levels and continues to be, I don't even know what the right word is, continues to kind of document that history and be held up as a kind of like an archive of social movement struggles. And yeah, just a great to be able to support such amazing organizing that BLM has been doing here in Toronto, and that kind of sparked a relationship with them where I, would open up the studio space or do work to support their work. Here's one where no one is illegal. A migrant justice organization reached out to me. Steve Bannon was coming to town, so I printed for them. I also made another one. Here we are. Some printing in the studio for the Wet'suwet'en, the Family Day in support of Wet'suwet'en March. This was at the end of 2019, I believe. And here's some of the posters. There's Christy Belcourt and Isaac Murdoch from the Onawon Collective, Dylan Miner, who's a Justseeds member, a Métis artist who lives in Michigan. And I did this one, and some sort of newspaper, online newspaper shots of sort of the work that's living in its in that good and kind of environment where you really want to see it. And there's the Christy Belcourt's design again, and always satisfying to be able to support all that good organizing by like trying to get clear messaging into the mediascape. Yeah, there's some more designs by Isaac Murdoch and Christy Belcourt. It's part of Grassy Narrows. This was the beginning. I like to pre-COVID life. It's nice to see people in the studio and just have that capacity to open up this space to folks to come in and work and feel like there's this possibility through print to feel like we're doing productive work and supporting struggle. There's kind of a spin-off project that Mary Tremonte is here and myself did with the youth from the Oasis Skateboard Factory, which is an alternative high school downtown that is modeled built around skateboarding and skateboard culture, where kids do design. They develop their own kind of brand. It's just an incredible space for kids who don't necessarily work well within the more mainstream public school system to have an outlet for their creativity and to be able to work and kind of engage. They have a Indigenous studies program that's taught by visiting Indigenous artists, and they decided that year to ask us to talk about Standing Rock and the kind of solidarity work that Justseeds and Justseeds members had been doing around that time. There was a Standing Rock demo here in Toronto where I brought, I think, 1,200 posters to give out. And after that, we took some of those designs. There's Dill Miner, and then this is the youth from the school did this design on site while we were there. That's a design I did. And this is Dignidad Rebel, like Jesus and Melanie, two members from Justseeds, did this design down in Oakland, California. And they let us use their work for this. So anyway, always fun to kind of work with youth and just feel that enthusiasm, and also take work and translate it into another medium. Another open studio day that I did with Mining and Justice Solidarity Network, focus on a memorial of a 16-year-old youth leader who was resisting Canadian mining in Guatemala, who'd been killed by security forces hired by this Canadian mining company. I'm going to speed talk. I think I'm going over time. Here's a quick installation that was a mix of Justseeds graphics that I did with Mary Tremonte for Nuit Blanche here in Toronto. You can see City Hall. Here we are getting ready with these like thousands of sheets of paper to go do like print with the public all night long. Here we are just before it starts. Josh McPhee and I had designed this wallpaper and covered this shipping container as part of an installation, like a larger installation project called Monument to a Century of Revolutions by Chet Dalo, which is a Russian artist cooperative that had been invited over, and they had then, in turn, they had a number of these shipping containers with their own work in it, and then had invited local organizations who are doing kind of grassroots organizing to also take containers and work with artists to interact with the public. So we talked to one of those local organizations to get cues on what kind of work we should be making with the public. And here we are printing old design I did shortly after Donald Trump came into power. This is 2017. Anyway, we printed all night. It's weird now in the COVID era to see so many people together. Anyway, it's kind of refreshing and a little bit like nerve-wracking going through all these pictures. And like, oh my God, we used to just hoard around in crowds. Yeah, here we are. It's like 5 to 6 in the morning, and things are finally, the line basically didn't stop all night. So here we are, just a few people coming as it kind of died off. The next 2 years later, I did Nuit Blanche again, but this time I did it in my studio space in a way that I had to absolutely not interact with the public whatsoever. And I could sit on my bench and drink a beer or two and watch people walk in and out of my space, which had been transformed. Here's the kind of takedown shot of like building cardboard walls. And yeah, this is just like more of a fun project of creating this sort of fantastical future space. Yeah, here's a really old piece that I did when I first got the press, sort of testing out being able to do. It's a scroll piece called Commencer vers la fin, or begin near the end. It's 2 by 30 feet long in panels. It's a still shot. This is just some of the more kind of like personal project fun type work that I like to do. There's a book work that I did in collaboration with Josh McPhee for the American Screenprinting Biennial in 2017, I believe. Got 2 by 3 foot prints. And then Eli Howie and Tatiana from Purcell Press were helping me do the collation and bookbinding on that. And there's a couple shots. We would, each artist, like Josh and I would each do a thing, and then we mix it, mash it back and forth, and the more towards the center of the book, the more mashed up things got. So you can see there's that type of thing. And then I'm gonna just play this for you. It's this beautiful, beautiful ink. This is like a little animation project I did with a OCAD student that I had back when students could come and do kind of expanded practice in the fields classes. I would, pre-pandemic, I would regularly have students working there, which was always fun to work with young people and share printing with them. Anyway, this is just a little animation that Adrian Mountain, who's an animation student, who was one of my interns, and I did together. While we were cleaning up the ink, we decided to organize it by color and come back and make this little thing. There we go. I'm going to try and come back. Now, how do I come back? Stop share. There, hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jesse. That was amazing.
There we go. That was me talking to people.
It's great to see the prints from like the studio and to how they get used, and all the support you're giving to different causes in Toronto, but also like so far spread throughout North America. So if anyone has questions, you can write them in the chat and I'll read them out to Jesse, or you can raise your hand, use the little hand emoji. But maybe just to get things started, I was wondering how the pandemic has affected that sort of network you have with Justseeds, and whether there's anything positive from this time that you will actually like adopt as like a new way moving forward for collaborating like over distance.
Well, I feel like the kind of regular use of Zoom, we'd started doing kind of Zoom check-ins, I think twice a year pre-pandemic. And then that we've ramped up. And it's a nice way to keep connection. And our office in Pittsburgh just started doing like an open Zoom day once a week where you can just come and visit this. I've never actually been in the new space that it's in now. So then we can like see what people are, see the folks working. And it's kind of like an added sort of social dimension. We had a bunch of new members join right before the pandemic. I think the number is 14, went up to 41. So it's been a weird time to have new members try and like join the group, integrate, can't get together physically. Some of the folks only know 1 or 2 members. But that, I think that kind of regular face-to-face contact over distance has been really good. It's allowed for folks to do like our community supported art project that people were co-designing online and over Zoom, and there's kind of a familiarity, like people kind of leveled up their tech skills through the pandemic. So that was something new that could happen that kind of expanded people's like collaborative capacity in terms of design. Weirdly, sales have been up. I guess people are spending a lot of time at home and redecorating. I don't know. So there's been a lot of support for Justseeds throughout the pandemic, which has been really nice to see. I have had a shit show, a bad time of a pandemic because a month in, there was upstairs, a Bitcoin mine caught fire and set off the sprinkler system, and 6 fire trucks showed up, and the building my studio was flooded. I just half destroyed, and I lost a significant chunk of my life's archive. And so I have not been I got 2 small kids too, a baby at the time, and like a 4-month-old baby at the time, and a 5-year-old. So the pandemic has been like not a great time. So I have not been really plugged into Justseeds. But the nice thing with Justseeds in that collective work is that people kind of come and go depending on their capacity year to year. I mean, it's been, what is that, 13 years now? And there's definitely years where I'm much more heavily involved than others. But yeah. And then for here, it's been slow. There's not a lot of, well, the studio was shut for like 8-9 months, caught in an insurance loop. And then I've just started doing some show posters again, but artists have wanted work. So it's like a mix, it's a mix. But in terms of that kind of like broader collective organizing, yeah, that face-to-face contact and kind of just figuring out a way to like establish relationships long distance has been good.
Great. I have a question from Pamela Dodds. I'm just going to unmute you, Pamela.
I can unmute. Oh, hi, Jessie. That's so interesting. And I have a question about how you organize your portfolios. Do you have a call for designs, or do you invite particular people to submit whatever design they want? And then I have a follow-up question.
Sure, it kind of really varies portfolio to portfolio. So sometimes someone in the group or a couple of people will be like, all right, I want to organize this portfolio. And then anyone in the group can participate. And then often the organizers or some members will be like, okay, there's these other people who are like directly affected by the issue, or they're coming from the community that's affected. We also want to bring them in and bring their voices directly in, not just in terms of suggestions and of how to address the issue, but like through their art, their actual art. For the downloadable graphics on our website, that is kind of an open call. Anyone can submit work. For the portfolios, I don't think we've done one that's been open to the public because there's already so many members.
I see. So members are welcome to submit.
Members are usually, although every once in a while they'll be like, okay, we're just doing a thing 12. And
okay, yeah.
You know, so some of those are smaller. It really varies. And some of them, it'll be with one organization that will like give a clear direction. They'll be like, all right, here are the 25 like bullet points of issues that we want to address. Can you give them to 25 artists and let them either do their own thing or they want to approve it? There's often some back and forth in terms of like messaging and the imaging. And then for others, it's like each person works with a different artist, or rather a different organizational group. And then it really varies from organization to organization how involved they might want to be in that messaging. Like we have the Storm portfolio. I was working with Untitled Camp, and there was some confusion over imaging, and I ended up having to reprint it, redesign and reprint it, which is fine. I mean, that's just that's just part of, you know, working and with community, and if there's not a consensus, sometimes you have to go back to the drawing boards, you know. So it really varies. Yeah.
Okay, and if I could ask a second question, I think like the graphic work that you produce, particularly, I mean, I think what makes an effective political poster is this combination, this graphic combination of imagery and text or slogan. And I wondered if you just got into that naturally, or you got training for that, or how you work with artists to develop those images, because I think it's a really unique talent to convey a message through compared to fine art, where you generally make an image, but the combination of graphic arts of text and image. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I think, well, I think that's part of the reason why it's spread across the continent, is there's not that many artists who go that direction, both tied to social movements and producing work and excited about print media, you know? So that's part of why we are such a dispersed group, is because there's just not that many. I mean, there are more and more. I'm not particularly internet savvy, but you know, the whole meme culture is happening. But I think that kind of print production is slightly, that graphic and text is slightly different that's happening with the poster production. I mean, it's a real mixed bag within the group. My background is in ceramics and textiles. And then I did blacksmithing growing up because my stepfather was a blacksmith. You know, so I have a real materials-based art practice in that, and I got interested in politics at a young age. So there was a lot of an older generation of kind of political graphic designers that I think influenced the people who are more like the earlier Justseeds members. There's more kind of younger members. I'm 44, born in 76. So in the like late 80s and 90s, there's a lot of stencil work stuff coming out of New York. There's World War III comics was like a collective of these socially engaged graphic design folks and comic people and printmakers and stencilists. So that's, I like a bit of where some of the artists are getting their background. Down in the southwest of the States, there's a whole, the Latinx community has got a completely different kind of cultural graphic history, which is great to get some relationship to. So I mean, different people are coming from different places.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know, I mean, it's a mix now. Everyone's significantly older than when we started because it's been chugging along. So some of the folks are actually teaching art institutions. Others have gone on to like have completely different careers, but still do this kind of graphic work, you know? And then, yeah, it's a mixed bag. But not everyone is trained, although a number of folks do go to art school.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
I hope that answers your question. But.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to get a general understanding of that.
Do we have any other questions? Oh, from Andrea here. Andrea's asking if you could talk a bit more about your Capture the Flag collaboration with Josh McPhee. She said, I feel like it's a political project, perhaps not as explicitly as some of the other poster graphics.
Yeah, that was a real different kind of just experimenting with form and color, and a bit like this idea of deconstructing flags and nationalism and how they get repurposed. And, you know, one person would give an image and then it would get kind of mashed, but it wasn't, yeah, it's not an explicitly political project. I'll see if I can grab one in 2 seconds. I can't find it. Anyway, sorry. I thought I knew which box it was in. Some things are still haven't gotten fully unpacked since the fire. But yeah, that was just, I feel like a way to kind of talk about some social issues, but really just kind of also enjoy the process of printmaking and color and form and be more abstract. I mean, I like doing that kind of work, but between Toronto and Ritz and the kind of responding to various work and social movement stuff, since I had kids, I've had a lot less time for that kind of printing for the pleasure of printing and making art just abstractly. That's just my own particular circumstance. But that was a real fun kind of project to work on. Yeah.
That's great. I think we'll just start to wrap up. That was awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for joining us. If you missed the last 2 talks with Laura Greer and Khadija Morley, they're actually available on our YouTube channel. So Laura is going to put some links in the chat that you can follow there. And she's going to put the link also to Open Studio's website. We're really happy to have reopened our physical space finally with exhibitions again. So our current shows feature Libby Haig, Sadko Hadzanovic, Philippe Blanchard, and Carlina Chen, and they run through till October the 23rd. And there's information about booking a gallery visit on our website in the link. Thank you again so much, Jessie, and that was an amazing talk. It's great to see that kind of work happening here in Toronto and all the connections that have been made too. And thanks also to Open Studio's Education Committee just for their support in organizing the Print Speak series, and to the Open Studio team working behind the scenes to make the events possible. And finally, thanks to everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your donations, your input and interest. And Laura's going to put the email address if you have any extra follow-up questions or feedback for us on the program, then we'd love to hear it. This talk is actually the last in the first season of Print Speak, but we're excited as to what the next iterations of it might be. So keep your eyes peeled, and there'll be some announcements, we think, in the new year. And we hope you'll be able to join us then. But in the meantime, thank you so much. And we hope you have a great rest of the day. And this video will also be uploaded to YouTube once we've edited it down. So yeah, thank you, everybody. Bye, have a great day.